We all know I'm only good for one thing, and that's manga recommendations. I've been trying to be experimental, doing lots of different things, but I know what y'all want at the end of the day. So here you go, some more manga recommendations. Now before we do get into them, if you are new to the channel, or if you've been watching me for some time and you haven't subscribed, make sure you like, leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell notifications. It'll only take a little bit of your time and it helps the channel immensely. The first recommendation is Alice in Hell. Honestly, I just kind of found this one randomly. I was bored just typing in random words, and then bam, this manga popped up, so then I checked it out. Alice in Hell is a post-apocalyptic story with the typical factions and all the whatnots you would expect from that type of environment. The only thing is our protagonist is actually insane. He's a kid whose father was like the best sniper in the world, so he taught his son how to be a sniper. So his son's ultimate goal and ambition is to be the greatest serial killer of all time. And the thing is the protagonist seems to have some redeeming qualities, being an extremely vulnerable character at first, but slowly and surely as the story goes on, we begin to figure out how mentally unstable he is. And then once we figure out his backstory, we can see that the lack of compassion and true love in one's childhood, well, it can result in some pretty horrendous things. He's also in possession of this sort of kind of android-like thing that he has to take care of that looks exactly like Alice from Alice in Wonderland, hence the name Alice in Hell. I read this story a few months ago. It's around 49 chapters. Personally, I think you could knock it out in a very short amount of time. I'd recommend it. Just a little bit of a disclaimer as the story can get pretty grotesque. The next manga on today's list, I guess, is Blue Heaven. Blue Heaven, another manga that was actually recommended to me, I think, over half a year ago, and I read it over half a year ago. And it's a quick, short, thrilling, action-packed story. Essentially, all these people are on a boat, and the one kind of in charge of this cruise is an absolute maniac, and is just flat-out racist. Like, I don't mean, like, oh, he said no, like, he's straight-up racist. Like, he wants all these people on this boat to die. And that's the antagonist of our story. Now, who's gonna stop this man? Well, someone who kind of hopped on this boat, who's a trained killer. Again, this is another one of those stories that I wouldn't necessarily sell it to you for the amazing characters or themes and all that. It's just a short, fun, action-packed story from beginning to end. And I'm pretty sure it's like around or less than 20 chapters. Okay, now this next one's a guilty pleasure of mine, and I don't really know where else to talk about it, but I want to talk about it. So the manga is Shangrila Frontier, and essentially it starts off with our protagonist who loves playing terrible video games until he walks into his gaming store and the owner's like, yo, why don't you try playing a good video game? So recommends him the most famous game in this fictional world, and he hops in his VR set, and since he's good and he's already used to being screwed over by bad video games, he's kind of getting the hang of this one a lot better, and he's falling in love with it because of good mechanics and la 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 la. Now, what would be the selling point of what seems to be another generic video game setting isekai, right? Although I don't really know if it actually qualifies as isekai because he's not stuck in this gaming world. Like, he could return to the real world and back and play other video games, which he does. The main reason I actually like this story is it feels like an actual video game being accomplished as it continues on, and it has some interesting concepts with that. And I just actually really enjoy the character interactions. It's fun. I can't really explain why, nor do I really want to. Sometimes you just like something and there's not really an explanation for it. Moving on, though, to the next recommendation, we have My DressUp Darling. Now, this recently got an anime. In fact, I saw episode 1 with the homies, and that's what compelled me to check out the manga, because you know how much of a manga junkie I am. And I actually really like the concept behind this series, because it tackles more than just, obviously, the basic romance in a rom-com, but it also kind of addresses the idea of hobbies and interests that people have, and sort of, despite maybe some of them not being quote-unquote normal per se, it's if somebody loves doing something, then let them do it. But from where the manga is currently at, I think the story actually moves at a decent pace. The relationship between the main character and the main girl, it's going along quite smoothly, I would say, and I find the dynamic between the characters extremely pleasant and fun to read. It's not overly repetitive, and it's not to the point where you're like, please, move on. Can there please be some progress with this relationship? So, for those that are currently suffering from the recent Rent-A-Girlfriend chapter, if you're looking for something new and better, here you go. Okay, now this next manga, I'm kind of upset that I read it, or at least I was at first, because, okay, let me explain the premise, and for those of you that read it, I want to see if you catch on. It's about a bio-terrorist who goes around his school terrorizing, I don't know if I could say. Okay, the story is on Nani Master Kurosawa. Look, okay, originally this story starts off as honestly, like a degenerate Death Note parody, but at the end of the story, it actually has some really beautiful character development. Like, it comes out of nowhere. Nah, but seriously, like, it's a story that at first you don't expect much from, and you think it's nothing but just a troll series that's recommended to you, until you reach the ending of it, and then you're left with a story that's actually a little bit beautiful. Don't get me wrong, like, it's still a little weird reading it, but I genuinely recommend it, as I think it's one of those stories that really hones in on the idea of self-improvement, of friendship, and seeing the characters kind of grow up in life is actually really heartwarming and incredibly touching. Again, another short story, around only like 20 chapters, but I'd recommend it. I'm not gonna say highly recommend it, but I'd recommend it. Okay, so I have a Death Note video either coming out before or after this video, and this is by the same author as Death Note. I know also wrote another series, Bakuman, which has been really recommended. I want to check that one out eventually. But Platinum's End. Now, Platinum's End visually has some of my favorite covers, art style, just period in manga. And the same goes for Death Note, especially with some of the manga wallpapers that it has. I'm going to be straight up. Do I think Platinum's End is as good as Death Note? No. Not at all. I think Death Note has a far better protagonist-antagonist dynamic, and overall as the story paces itself a lot better. And so if you haven't read Death Note, go ahead and check it out. But regarding Platinum's End, it's a lot shorter. It's only around 50 chapters. They do go by a little slow because there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of content within these chapters. But I think this story offers a lot of really interesting concepts, and it tries to tackle a lot of really interesting themes that are very, very thought-provoking, which is something that I always enjoy. Overall, I think the story it tries to be thrilling, but I think the format of the story kind of fails in doing so. And I don't know what it is, but it feels like the mystery towards things and the conflicts just don't really have all the impact that I think a Death Note really had. To explain the premise, our protagonist tries to commit suicide, and so then he's visited by this angel that grants him the wish of wanting to make his life happy and help him discover a happy life because, again, his life kind of sucks. So he ends up having these powers, the ability to fly with angel wings, and these things known as white and red arrows. Red arrows making somebody fall in love with you, and white arrows which can instantly kill someone. The thing is he's not the only person. There's 12 other people with these powers. Not all of them have the white arrow, though. So essentially, this is one big battle royale because the angels need to select a candidate for who will take the position of God. Sounds like a really intriguing premise, but the way the story goes about it in the end I find is a little bit disappointing, but that's just my personal opinion. I'd still recommend this manga for you to check it out and have your own opinions on the series. Okay, so I lied because manga isn't the only thing I'm recommending in this video. This one's a manhwa, and it's The Hero Has Returned. You can find it on Webtoon if you want to check it out and read it. And this story was actually recommended to me by a real-life friend, shouts out Carlins, and he recommended me this a while ago, I think almost near the beginning of last year. And this story, when I read the first chapter, I was absolutely blown away because it was the first chapter unlike anything else I'd ever seen. It does things in a very different manner, and it totally hooked me. So essentially, this story starts off like its basic isekai. However, it's at the end of the story where what seems to be our main character is about to finally go back home. The tragedy is when he goes back home, he realizes that his family is dead, the world has moved on without him, and life sucks. So he feels like his reward for saving an entire other reality is completely unfair. So now he desires everyone else to be miserable with him. Now, this story is very, very edgy, I'm not gonna lie. However, you can't say it's not fun. And this first chapter is absolutely incredible, because that is actually not the main character of our story. The main character of our story is established in the upcoming chapters. It's a very unorthodox way to present a narrative, but it's, again, one that I think grasped me entirely. As for the current state of the story, I'm not going to say I'm the biggest fan of the direction in which it's kind of taken. It's not what I expected, but overall, I think it's one to keep an eye on, and again, you could catch up immediately. It's like 34 chapters. But just like a lot of other manhwa, it's incredibly hype. Now, this next story is completed, and it's only around like 12, 13 chapters, but it's a short, to the point, thriller mystery. And this story has some incredible artwork, some of the best I've seen, and that's Aishas Secret. So imagine like the typical Disney princess thing, kind of the Cinderella storyline. Bad stepmother into another family, her mom died, this new family treats her like crap. And actually, it's an extremely abusive household, and you genuinely feel terrible for her. Eventually, she grows up with this family, and things get to the point that this stepmom takes her out into the woods and kills her, until she seemingly comes back to life and proceeds to haunt her and the rest of the family, eventually bringing ruin. And the mystery behind how this is possible is actually really well done in my opinion, and properly foreshadowed. The only complaint I have about this story is that I low-key wish it was longer because I genuinely enjoyed it that much. Although, maybe the concepts that the author's trying to put within the story maybe don't work in a longer format. So for shorter manhwas, or whatever this would classify as, this is probably one of the, if not the best one I've read. Now, in my opinion, I've saved the best for last, and that story is out. It is a delinquent manga series, and it does a lot of the things that are typical of delinquent manga series. It's extremely vulgar, it has characters that look a lot older than their actual age. But this story begins with our protagonist, Iguchi, I don't know if I don't know if there's an anime for it, I don't know how it's pronounced, I'm sorry. Point is he's recently been released from juvie, and he's trying not to go back because of the horrible punishment that exists there, and he's trying to live a clean life without violence. However, violence seems to always find him at every turn and every corner, as he even ends up befriending one of the captains of one of the largest gangs in the area in which he lives. Now, this manga has been going on since like 2012, and I'm pretty sure it's still ongoing, and if I'm not mistaken, it has 197 chapters so far. So this is the longest story that I've recommended, and if I had to really sell it to you, I think this has one of the strongest casts in all of manga. It has a lot of really amazing characters with a ton of character dynamics that's really easy to fall in love with. Also, the fighting is extremely intense and sometimes borderline ridiculous for a delinquent series. My favorite character being Meguro, without a doubt. That man is an absolute... when y'all get to his character, you'll see. There's only one kind of criticism / disclaimer that I have to give regarding this series, and that's that the main character is genuinely either barely there or completely irrelevant and absent for like a solid 100 chapter stretch. And I'm not kidding. When it was like 30-40 chapters, I was like, okay. And then it was 50, and then it was 60, and then it was 7. By 80, I was like, all right, this is a little bit ridiculous. As what kind of ends up happening is the author seems to establish so many characters that have absolutely no relation to the protagonist, and then goes into backstories for those characters, that the protagonist, again, is just completely irrelevant from like chapter 90 to the rest of the story. And look, don't get me wrong, I still love the manga immensely, and I would actually argue that the stretch that he's not present is the best stretch in the entire series, without a doubt. It's an insanely just wild but incredible delinquent war arc, if you will. And the narrative reasons as to why the protagonist isn't there makes sense. However, again, it's just something that I want to throw out there as a disclaimer, because even though I really like his character, I can't really... I don't really know if I can say anything extremely positive about him as a protagonist when he's not even really present in the story. And this isn't something like Real, where there's different protagonists, or Dorohedoro, where it chooses to focus on other characters, but even then, it all rounds back to the main character, Kaiman, and the mystery behind him. No, it genuinely feels like he's demoted from his role as main character, which is a shame because I really liked him. But I'd still highly recommend it because there's plenty of other characters and so many awesome fight scenes, and also incredible planning. For a delinquent series, yo, these delinquents ain't stupid. They got some master plans. So, again, definitely check it out. I highly recommend it. Again, just with the small caveat that I wouldn't attach yourself too much to the main character, at least at this current moment where the story's at. As always, though, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, or any other recommendations that you might have. And once again, if you are new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, turn on the bell notifications. Also, liking helps immensely. This has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.